Good afternoon. I'm Keval Dattani.
I'm Natasha Eager-Jones.
I'm Chris Tymouth, and welcome to Warwick Congress Weekly. This week we'll be talking about Theresa May and the latest on Brexit negotiations, Henry Bolton and his sacking as leader from UKIP, and the ongoing Russian investigation with Mueller indicting 13 national Russians.
We've got news on Jacob Zuma's resignation as the president of South Africa, and a selection of financial news from the past week.
We'll also have news on the recent Florida shooting, news on PIMCO, and finally the use of AI in Chinese pig farms.
But first, as always, we're going to tell you a bit about Warwick Congress, who we are, what we do, and how we do it.
Warwick Congress is one of the fastest growing student-run initiatives in the UK that aims to unite the disciplines of finance, economics, politics and law into a single platform. To stay up to date with everything we do, sign up for free membership on our website, www.warwickcongress.com.
Our hope is that Warwick Congress Weekly can inform our listeners, so if you have any questions, queries or opinions, then please message in and let us know. You can do so by going to www.radio.warwick.ac.uk and pressing the message tab on the top right corner, or you can tweet us at raw1251am.
Last week on our show, we asked for feedback from some of you, and we were quite overwhelmed actually with the response that we did get. And we're quite glad to say that a lot of you do like our show, which obviously we're pleased about. But one of the things that did come through was that you wanted it to be a bit less formal, bit less structured, but still contain the same sort of news and facts. So that's what we're going to try and deliver to you today. But if you do have any more feedback for us, then please do let us know. So as Chris said, our first story of the week is Henry Bolton. So Tash, what have you got for us?
Well, basically, Henry Bolton has been sacked as leader of the UKIP party due to controversial racist messages that his partner sent out about Meghan Markle. And 63% of UKIP have voted to back a no-confidence motion at a meeting in Birmingham. So Gerard Batten will now take over as the interim leader, and there'll be a leadership election within 90 days. And I thought it was quite interesting, actually. Mr Bolton has been the party's fourth leader for UKIP in 18 months, and he only served for 5 months as party leader, with the previous leader being Paul Nuttall, who quit following a poor election outcome for UKIP, because they only got 1.8% of the vote compared to the 12.6% they had in 2015.
So that's been quite a big story on this side of the pond. Over on the other side of the pond, Special Counsel Robert Mueller has indicted 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities for allegedly meddling in the 2016 presidential election, charging them with conspiracy to defraud the United States. So it probably raises questions of what were the details inside the indictment, and effectively it concludes that Russians were involved in a campaign to influence the 2016 presidential election. And this confirms long-standing suspicions held within the intelligence community of Russian involvement. Details within the indictment highlight how Russian influence was key in deploying social media tactics that promoted Trump and attempted to smear the Hillary Clinton campaign. So, for example, according to the indictment, Russians would create an email address, for example, allforususa@yahoo.com, and pretend to be a US person in order to send out press releases in June 2016 for a March for Trump rally to New York media outlets. And although the indictment does detail communication between unnamed Trump campaign officials and Russian defendants, the indictment does fall short of alleging that any American knowingly took part in any illegal activity.
But what sort of reaction has there been in, obviously, Russia itself and also from the White House, from Trump himself, of the release of the indictment?
Yeah, so President Trump's been really, really vocal on this subject, as I'm sure we've all seen, and he's still not convinced that Russia interfered in the election. And in a statement released by the White House afterwards, he said he was glad to see that no collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia was found, and he echoed similar thoughts in albeit a less formal manner on Twitter. And the Russian government denied on Monday that it had interfered in the 2016 US election campaign, with a spokesman for Russian President Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Peskov, saying that the indictments provided no substantial evidence of Russian meddling and that there was no indication that the Russian state could have been involved, which kind of repeats the line that we've been seeing from Mr. Putin for the last year, really, since the Trump presidency began. Another quite significant story around the world this last week has been that of Jacob Zuma. So what have you got for us, Chris?
The ever controversial president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, he's resigned, but before this he defied orders from his own party, the African National Congress.
Yeah.
to leave office on the eve of his no confidence vote in Parliament after sort of many accusations of corruption over the years.
So why has it come now after these accusations that you talk about, and I guess with a no confidence vote coming up?
I think it's just a culmination of sort of a prolonged saga of a mess in South African politics, with allegations of corruption just keeping on adding up for Jacob Zuma's presidency. And last week we saw actually the South African police and an elite team raided the home of a sort of controversial but also very wealthy family called the Guptas, who were accused of improper dealings with Zuma. And as we said, the controversy isn't new, with his sort of tenure marred by economic decline, multiple charges of political corruption, including sort of using state funds to build a palatial home, like we've seen with many dictators over the years. And this is just undermines the image and legitimacy of the African National Congress, which obviously is famous for Mandela leading it to victory and for leading the black South Africans to freedom in 1994. And because of this, a lot of South Africans who have been supporters of the ANC for a long time have become frustrated with the internal politics and the corruption within the party. And this has been translated into their results in the municipal elections in 2016, when a coalition government was nearly formed, which is unseen ever since 1994. And as a result, the party strategists wanted President Zuma to be sort of sidelined, put away from the public as quickly as possible to allow the African National Congress to regroup before campaigning for the elections next year in 2019.
So who's going to take over from Jacob Zuma then?
It's sort of the clear path is towards his deputy president, Cyril Ramaphosa, who took over leadership of the African National Congress in December. And if he does take over from Zuma, he'll have to balance the need to reassure the foreign investors and local businesses, which are really key for the inner workings of South Africa, against the intense popular demand for dramatic measures to address sort of South Africa's deep-rooted problems. And in the aftermath of the resignation, the good news may be that the rand, the South African currency, has strengthened, and that South Africa's economic growth predictions may have to be revised to suggest the economy may grow. So Zuma's resignation may prove very fruitful for the country. But of course, there'll be still some caution with the optimism, as there is a long way to go for South Africa to recover from such political uncertainty.
I think political uncertainty there is quite a key word for a lot of what we see around the world, definitely what we see here at home. I think Brexit has dictated that word, political uncertainty, for almost, the last 2 years now. And I believe Tash does have an update for us on Brexit, as ever.
I do. It wouldn't be a show of Warwick Congress Weekly about some Brexit news. So, basically, Theresa May has stated that Britain is going to withdraw from the EU's joint foreign policy making body, which is the Common Foreign and Security Policy, next year. And she's pledged to reclaim a truly independent and sovereign foreign policy. However, she is adamant to kind of keep a close relationship with the EU in regards to kind of security, and she spoke about sort of forging a security alliance with the EU. So she does want to continue working closely in regards to kind of international sanctions, foreign aid, and future defence threats like cyber warfare. So it looks unclear as to whether kind of withdrawing from this kind of EU policy-making body is actually going to make much of a difference to the UK after Brexit. However, the move has been criticised by President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, who basically stated that Theresa May can't really hold the EU to ransom over this security alliance, and that before any kind of security alliance does need to be sort of agreed upon, there are bigger issues that need to be addressed first, such as the Northern Irish border and the divorce bill that will have to be settled for Brexit to kind of go ahead.
Okay, so I think uncertainty is probably the way that one's still going to keep going, and we'll definitely have an update on Brexit and whatever that does bring for you next week. And as Tash said, it wouldn't be Warwick Congress Weekly without a Brexit update. It wouldn't be Warwick Congress Weekly without a financial news update either. So in what could be one of the biggest overseas deals ever, Walmart is in talks to purchase a stake of more than 40% in Indian e-commerce firm Flipkart, which is a direct challenge effectively to Amazon in Asia's third largest economy. And according to Reuters, Flipkart would be valued at more than $12 billion figure that was given when SoftBank's Vision Fund took roughly a fifth of the firm last year for about $2.5 billion. So that'd be quite a large transaction there. Bitcoin broke through the $11,000 mark last night for the first time since January, as Venezuela announced today's even pre-sale of its petro cryptocurrency, which will be backed by oil, gas, gold, and diamond reserves. Venezuela's crypto regulator said it would draw investment from Qatar, Turkey, and other Middle Eastern countries, as well as from European nations and the US for that cryptocurrency. The world's largest oil exporter, Saudi Arabia, is exploring the use of nuclear energy for domestic energy consumption as part of its transition away from an oil-based system. Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir at the Munich Security Conference over the weekend said, "We're looking at a number of countries that have nuclear technology for peaceful purposes so that we can save the oil and export it in order to generate revenue." So it's quite an interesting move there to move purely towards an oil exporting industry instead of using it for domestic consumption as well. And the 19 finance ministers of the Eurozone gathered yesterday to discuss who should become the next vice president of the European Central Bank. And Spanish economic minister Luis de Guindos landed the role. And it could mean that the next ECB president, which is a role that becomes vacant in 2019, is more likely to come from a northern European country, given that Spain is in the south of Europe. And that would mean that a more hawkish member could be made president of the European Central Bank when compared to current incumbent president Mario Draghi. And your final bit of financial news for the week is about Black Panther, who blew away even the most lofty expectations for its debut weekend in the cinemas, posting the 5th best US opening of all time and beating the likes of Iron Man, The Dark Knight, and also Superman, with the Disney film earning an estimated $192 million from Friday through to Sunday. And with yesterday being a public holiday in American President's Day, it was thought likely to soar over $220 million, so it's quite significant. Staying with the theme for the US, obviously there's been quite a lot of news from the USA coming out about the Florida shooting. So students have organised a march in response to that, and Chris does have some news for us on this somber topic.
Yes, so as you said, after this horrific shooting last week, the young survivors of this event announced the National March on Washington, D.C. on the Capitol itself. And to the US media, they said that they are determined to make this shooting a turning point of the national gun debate, hopefully to convince the NRA and the Trump administration to perhaps be more strict on guns. And obviously the attack, which happened last Wednesday, left 17 students and staff members dead, and it was the deadliest school shooting since 2012. So the march will be planned for the 24th of March. It demands really that children and their families become a priority to US lawmakers and not sort of the gun lobby that people have criticised the Republicans for. And they also want this to trigger other protests around the country to sort of spread the message countrywide and statewide. And a particular survivor from the school shooting, Cameron Kasky, said that we are losing our lives while the adults are playing around, which I think really sums up a lot of the national feeling at the moment, where the Trump administration is concentrating more on the gun lobby rather than the protecting the children and their families. And on Saturday itself, actually, the students, parents and politicians took part in a very sort of emotional rally in Fort Lauderdale, close to the Parkland shooting, where protesters chanted "Shame on you" to the US lawmakers and President Trump.
So how have US lawmakers and President Trump, and I guess the government as a whole, responded to it? Because that's quite an emotionally charged setting, like you said. Yeah. And there's quite a significant response saying that we're losing our lives while the adults are playing around. Yeah,
so in his first sort of public comments on the gun control issue since the attack, President Trump, of course, in his typical style, blamed the Democrats for not passing legislation when they controlled Congress during the early years of Obama's administration. And obviously this incurred a lot of anger from Democrats and also those affected by the shooting. Mr. Trump went on to meet the survivors of the attack on Friday and blamed the shooters' mental health and FBI's failing rather than the US gun laws. And the shooter, who was 19-year-old Mr. Cruz, was known to the police and was investigated in 2016 after posting evidence of self-harm on his on Snapchat. So Trump feels this was a massive failing of the FBI not stopping this attack.
So obviously the wider implications of this shooting are, well, it could be extremely significant in terms of the Second Amendment and obviously the gun lobby, like you said. So where does the US stand right now in the kind of gun law debate?
Yeah, obviously it's been raging on for years now, ever since obviously we had Columbine in the 90s. That I think that really just started it all, and it's continued ever since then. And it's we've seen that last year Trump said that he would never infringe on the right to keep arms, and during his actual campaign for the presidency he put the NRA at the centre of it, saying he was a friend of the NRA. And I think that the Washington March will hopefully express the political demand and the popular demand to rethink gun legislation. And yeah, so hopefully the march will be a turning point, but it'll be hard to see.
Fair enough. Hopefully we'll see some traction in terms of gun lobbies, and we do wish the best for all the families and those affected in that horrific shooting. Another significant piece of news that I guess could have fit on the financial category is to do with PIMCO, the Pacific Investment Management Company, which is the world's largest bond fund manager, and it's reported its sixth straight quarter of cash inflows and its best quarterly profit since September 2014. And this date is significant because since it was the co-founder Bill Gross which hit the company badly with heavy outflows and management tensions. And the recent recovery has been attributed to the performance of Gross's replacement, Dan Ivaskin.
So what are kind of some of the figures behind this resurgence of PIMCO then? Yeah,
well, the performance has represented a Q4 operating profit of 546 million euros, so it's quite a staggering figure, 10% up from the third quarter of 2017. And the net flows for the quarter was recorded at 43 billion euros, with an annual inflow of 144 billion euros. So it's quite significant money movement there into their funds, what Paul Andrews talked about at Warwick Congress in terms of cash flow. And the company is owned by German insurer giant Allianz. And the Allianz CEO, Oliver Bates, said that the turnaround at PIMCO is complete, and now the question is how to act in an interest rate environment that is first volatile and second driven by inflation.
So we heard that obviously ever since Mr. Gross's departure, it suffered. So how far PIMCO come since that time?
Well, I mean, even before Mr. Gross left, investors had taken out around $65 billion from the PIMCO Total Return Fund, which is one of its largest. And then when Mr. Gross left, hundreds of billions of client money followed, since he was such an influential bond investor, I guess a superstar. However, the turnaround is impressive, with PIMCO's income fund now controlling more than $79 billion, which is more than what the Total Return Fund managed under Gross himself. But Dan Ivaskin still has a long way to go to match the $300 billion that Mr. Gross's fund was worth at its peak in 2012, before the significant equity market rally that we have seen over the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years. And the signs are showing that PIMCO will continue to recover and grow, which Allianz also has quite significant faith in as well. Our next story for you, I think it's our final story for the day, is to do with AI in China and pig farms. So this one sounds interesting. What have you got for us, Tash?
Well, yeah, like you said, I think this is a really interesting, unique story. So basically in China, artificial intelligence technology has been developed to help manage kind of huge pig farms in the country. And the technology has been developed by Chinese tech giant Alibaba. And the company earlier in the month signed a deal with the pig farming corporation Decon Group, as well as the pig feed manufacturer Teku, to develop and deploy these AI-powered tracking systems.
So how will the AI system work with the pigs?
I mean, it sounds very complicated, but basically the deal is worth kind of tens of millions of dollars and relies on machine vision to replace the wireless radio frequency tags, which used to follow the pigs around on the farm. And this could provide expensive and time-consuming, as each pig actually requires its own individual tag to track them. And with tens of millions of pigs born in China every year, this is quite a monumental task for kind of farmers to have to undertake. And it also requires overhead cameras to track and count the pigs, with temperature readings from infrared sensors recording how much each pig is moving in a day. And this allows the AI to kind of estimate the health of the individual pig. So it helps farmers to kind of know more about how the pigs are doing and kind of to help to reduce kind of pig death rates.
So, I mean, you talked about temperature readings, infrared sensors. That sounds like it's going to be really, really expensive for pig farmers. So, I mean, yeah, don't you think it will put off farmers and the government in China?
I mean, yeah, it does sound really complex, and obviously it comes at a high price. But it does seem that this is actually a much welcomed innovation for the Chinese pig farming industry, which actually suffers a number of problems. So, for example, China is the world's biggest producer and consumer of pork, but the industry is actually incredibly inefficient since 90% of China's pork is produced from small backyard farms, and these people often buy and sell at the wrong time, which leads to market volatility. And China has tried to tackle this issue by cutting subsidies for small farmers and kind of introducing more regulation to encourage them to expand. But it does seem like this AI technology truly does have the potential to kind of modernise the industry and increase efficiency.
So that's quite an interesting story for us to end on. And I think we've now got some summaries of everything that you've heard today.
Our first story was the UKIP members have voted to sack party leader Henry Bolton due to controversy over racist messages sent by his partner. And Gerard Batten will take over as the interim leader in the meanwhile, and a leadership election will be held within 90 days. Special Counsel Robert Mueller laid out charges against 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities on Friday. This sweeping indictment describes in detail an unprecedented years-long effort by Russia to interfere with the US political system and the 2016 presidential election. We've seen Jacob Zuma has resigned as president of South Africa on the eve of a no-confidence vote. He will be replaced by Cyril Ramaphosa, who is set with the task of restoring stability to the country and faith in the government.
Despite airing her intentions to withdraw from the common foreign and security policy next year, Theresa May remained dedicated to working closely with the EU over matters of security. However, Jean-Claude Juncker remains adamant that Britain will not be able to use its military might to win a more favourable trade deal with the EU after Brexit, with the Irish border issue and the divorce bill still to be settled. And that Brexit story is one that we will continue to update you on every week. And in response to the shooting in Florida last week, students are organising a national march in Washington. An emotionally charged rally on Saturday expressed protesters' demand to change gun laws in the US in response to the attack, and President Trump has blamed the Democrats for not passing legislation previously, as well as the shooter's mental health record and the failings of the FBI in this specific case.
The world's largest bomb fund manager, PIMCO, continued to show recovery from its loss of its co-founder after it posted its best quarterly profit ever since he left. And finally, Chinese tech giant Alibaba has developed AI technology to help rear pigs, which could dramatically modernise the Chinese pork industry.
Becoming a member of Warwick Congress has never been easier. With exclusive interviews, articles and careers events for our members, don't miss out on the benefits that Warwick Congress membership can provide. Sign up now at www.warwickcongress.com. Don't forget, we've got interviews coming out from all of our speakers from Warwick Congress 2018, as well as their speeches that will at some point be made available to all of our members. So don't forget to sign up for your membership to have access to that as quickly as you can. As soon as it's up, we will email you to let you know. You've been listening to Warwick Congress Weekly. Our podcast will be back at the same time next Tuesday.